Hey everyone, and welcome to Season 4 of the Black is America podcast. Quick programming note. During Doug Williams' era, the team was known as the Washington Redskins, a name now widely recognized as a bit offensive. Out of respect, I will refer to the team as either Washington, the Washington football team, or the current name, the Washington Commanders, throughout this episode. However, you may hear the original name in some archival content. I did my best to minimize its use, and I appreciate your understanding. This decision was about acknowledging history while being mindful of its impact today. And now, we present Doug Williams, the American quarterback, and it begins now.
Beautiful day for football.
It's January 31st, 1988, in San Diego, California, at Jack Murphy Stadium. We are here at the Super Bowl, the biggest stage in professional football. Here under the California lights, two teams are set to clash, the Denver Broncos and the Washington football team, vying for the ultimate prize here in the National Football League. By the 1980s, the Super Bowl was more than just a football game. It was a cultural phenomenon. Over 80 million viewers would tune in. There was a halftime show, but nowhere near the spectacle it is today. I'll share why later this season. But for now, this year's entertainment was the legendary Chubby Checker, who we celebrated in Season 1. But the real historic moment came when Jennifer Jones stepped out onto the stage, becoming the first African-American Rockette to perform at the Super Bowl. Yet, as significant as her groundbreaking performance was, history was also being made on the field, which brings us to the focal point of this episode. Doug Williams, quarterback of Washington, who has had a great playoff run since being named the starter the last week of the regular season. Williams carried more than his team's championship hopes on his shoulder. See, for decades, a harmful narrative lingered in professional football. The belief that black quarterbacks didn't have what it takes to lead teams to glory. Uncle Dougie wasn't just playing against the Denver Bronco linebackers and defensive ends that day. He was staring down a legacy of bias in a society that questioned his ability to perform on the grandest stage of them all. But here's the thing about trailblazers. They don't just play the game, they change it. And when you're Doug Williams, who has proven people wrong at every level of this sport at the QB1 position, today will be like any other day, reminding the world that you are him. We come from innovators, heroes, and royalty. We are our ancestors' greatest hope. We face many challenges, but we mold that adversity into our greatest strength. We are the glue that holds a nation together and allows it to flourish. Welcome to Black is America, the podcast that highlights little-known African-American figures and stories that make our history come to life. I'm your host, Dominic Lawson. Episode 1, Doug Williams, the American quarterback. The quarterback position is often called the most demanding role in sports. And on any given Sunday, they're expected to be the generals on the field, reading defenses, calling audibles, and delivering a great ball with pinpoint accuracy. A role that demands not just physical skill, but almost a chess-like mental acuity. But that is why they're paid the big bucks. They often command the highest salaries in the league. As of this recording, Dak Prescott, quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, has the highest per-year contract, raking in $60 million a year. Life-changing money, to say the least. But historically, someone like Dak, who is African-American, would not be able to command such a salary, which has cast a shadow over the position for a long time. A shadow that reeks of ignorance, bias, and let's just call it what it is, systemic racism. For decades, many NFL coaches and executives believed that black athletes weren't, quote, cerebral enough to play the quarterback position. So you would see them make black quarterbacks who were very successful in college be pushed to other positions when they go to the NFL. Wide receivers, defensive backs, maybe even running backs. But this belief wasn't just limited to the QB1 position. It was also believed to be true in another cerebral position, coaching. Don't believe me? Well, boy, do I have a story for you. As a matter of fact, let's get some different music in here, because I believe clown behavior warrants clown music. In 2007, the Miami Dolphins were in search of a new head coach, and they interviewed a young African-American coach, Mike Tomlin. According to former Miami Herald columnist Armando Seguro, Tomlin had a great interview, but the top brass said he was too hip-hop for the organization. What the f*** does that even mean? So instead, the Dolphins ended up hiring Cam Cameron, who didn't stay long because he ended up being fired after his one and only season, going 1-15. As for the apparent hip-hop head Mike Tomlin, he would end up being hired by the Pittsburgh Steelers, appearing in 2 Super Bowls, winning 1, and leading the Steelers to 18 seasons, and get this, without having one losing record. And this belief wasn't exclusive to football. Across sports, many believe that black athletes do not have the capacity to do the central part of the profession. Take a listen to this conversation Ted Koppel of ABC News is having with Dodgers GM Al Campanis on April 6, 1987. Listen to what this said on national TV.
Is there still that much prejudice in baseball today?
No, I don't believe it's prejudice. I truly believe that they may not have some of the necessities to be, let's say, a field manager or perhaps a general manager.
You really believe that?
How many quarterbacks do you have? How many pitchers do you have that are black? It's same
yeah, but I
thing
mean,
applies.
I got to tell you, that sounds like the same kind of garbage we were hearing 40 years ago about players when they...
After those remarks, Al's small-minded Campanis was out of a job 2 days later. Which brings us to this segment's sponsor, Ignoring DEI, otherwise known as Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Ignoring DEI, now in travel size. So the next time you go shopping for greatness, seeing it right there on the shelf and saying, nah, that's too hip-hop for me. So instead, you'll walk out with mediocrity under the guise of meritocracy and a 1-15 record. Ignoring DEI, because why win when you can stereotype? But this is why I wanted to tell the story of Uncle Dougie. He had to fight through a lot just to play in the Super Bowl, but when he did, just like we tend to do in Black America, he reset the standard of not just how the black QB should be evaluated, but also resetting the standard in the Super Bowl era. And that brings us to the phone call I placed in Season 3. If you remember in the post-credit content of Ann Lowe, an American Original episode, I was scrolling through the December 1966 issue of Ebony magazine, where we got a lot of information about Ann Lowe from. But also in that issue was this piece about 1966 being the year of the quarterback. Black quarterbacks, of course. And if you're listening and asking yourself, Black as America has post-credit content? Why, yes, it does. There was one other episode in Season 3 that does as well. And spoiler alert, there's going to be one at the end of this episode also. But anyways, let me get back to the business. That piece highlighted a few signal callers at the college level, including my guy, Jimmy Ray. This Michigan State Spartan would lead his team to not only quite the season, but a national title as well. This ultimately led him to play and coach in the NFL. My friend Sean Smith over at Drippin' in Black Productions and Michigan State Spartan alum would definitely appreciate the mention of Jimmy. By the way, be sure to check out the Drippin' in Black podcast where Black excellence from across the diaspora is celebrated. And who knows, you may even hear a familiar voice on there from time to time. The link is there in the show notes of your podcast player. But that article gave me the idea to talk about Uncle Dougie and the idea to call someone I personally know to give me some unique insight.
Yo, Dominic, what's up, man? How are you?
I'm good, man. What's happening?
I'm living a dream, brother, man. I really appreciate this.
I no doubt, man. Yes, sir.
So here's the thing.
This is my good friend, Coach Kenton Evans, championship-winning coach, and someone who is known to sling it around back in his day.
Yeah, man. Got my start, and of course, in high school at Westwood High School in Memphis. And I had the opportunity to start as a 10th grader. Surprisingly, I was able to put up some pretty good numbers throughout my 3 years at Westwood, finishing my high school career as the fourth all-time leading passer in high school history with over 10,500 yards and finished with 115 touchdown passes in 3 years. Man.
And the reason I know him personally is because we went to the same high school, Westwood, Longhorns for life. So I thought he would be an excellent resource for this episode, which is why I brought him in. So I was curious, when was the first time he learned about Doug Williams? Someone who paved the way for not just Coach Evans, but others who looked like him.
I was young. I had to be at least 9 or 10 years old. Of course, sitting up just watching TV. Back then, when I was younger, really all you saw on TV was Dan Marino or Boomer Esiason, those type of QBs. You really didn't see many black guys like myself. And then, of course, as you get older, you start to see Randall Cunningham or Warren Moore or Vince Evans. So you start to see those guys and playing the QB position. And of course, my last name is Evans. So whenever I would see Vince Evans on TV, I would say, that's my Uncle Vince playing on TV. So that was a thing, man. But having a chance to just really watch the Redskins, of course, when they had Art Monk, Gary Clark, Ricky Sanders at receiver, then, of course, you had the Hogs up front. Right. So you had a chance to just really see the Redskins. And of course, when they went to the Super Bowl in '88, it was such a big deal about him being the first black quarterback to play in the Super Bowl and to win the Super Bowl. So that was a thing, man. So being around 9, 10, 11 years old was when I first saw or heard about Doug Williams. But of course, like I said, my earlier times, I was more like Dan Marino fanatic. That was pretty much my guy until I got to see guys that look like me playing the QB position.
What Coach Evans reminds us of is why representation matters. From the movie screen to the gridiron, it can have a profound impact on those watching to further explore what is possible. Which is why we need to go to the beginning, on August 9th, 1955, where Douglas Lee Williams was born in Zachary, Louisiana, up the road from Baton Rouge. He grew up in a really big family, with Robert and Laura Williams being one of 8 kids. And like many black families in the South, they lived under racial segregation, especially in a small town like Zachary. Like many black families in the Deep South, Uncle Dougie's upbringing was shaped by oppression and segregation, barriers designed to halt progress. In Louisiana, the Ku Klux Klan's presence loomed large, with acts of intimidation like cross burnings, keeping communities in fear. And these injustices touched every aspect of daily life, where black families could eat, shop, even access to medical care. Banks routinely denied them loans, making home ownership and entrepreneurship nearly impossible. And schools, overcrowded and underfunded, a direct result of the separate but equal doctrine upheld by Plessy versus Ferguson, which fittingly originated in Louisiana. This brings us to Cheneyville High School, where a young Doug Williams first began to defy the odds. These were the conditions Uncle Dougie grew up in, but he found a way forward through sports, which is something I hold dear. It's not just the spectacle of it all, right? But because you live in a world stacked against you by systemic racism, sports can be one of the few places where the playing field is truly level. You either perform or you don't. Like a real meritocracy. And Doug shined in a few sports. By him being over 6 feet tall, it was natural that he would play basketball. And with a cannon for an arm, him being a pitcher in baseball makes sense as well. But those two attributes, being really tall and a really strong arm, would definitely be a great attribute for a different sport, for a specific position, quarterback of the football team. Now, originally they had him playing linebacker, But when he switched to QB, his talent and leadership was on full display. See what getting an opportunity looks like? Great leaders don't just set the vision, they create opportunities for others to become leaders themselves. Talent thrives when given a chance. And yet too often, potential is overlooked because it doesn't fit a, quote, mold. Throughout Uncle Dougie's journey, several coaches looked past his appearance and focused solely on his talent, attributes, and performance on the field. Coach Evans knows about this firsthand and what it's like to benefit from that kind of opportunity.
We kind of broke the mold, man, when it came to passing offense in the state of Tennessee, in the city of Memphis as well. I'm definitely fortunate to be in that system and have an opportunity to do what I was able to do on the high school level for those 3 years that I was at Westwood.
Coach said something just now that intrigued me. Let's rewind the tape to show you what I mean.
I'm definitely fortunate to be in that system and have an opportunity to do what I was able to do.
I want to focus on the system because that's the knock, right? What's that campaign that said again?
They may not have some of the necessities to be, let's say, a field manager or perhaps a general manager.
Oh, yeah, that crap. So I had a bit of a two-part question for Coach from his high school days. I was curious about the offensive play calling that he had to learn as a 10th grader. Rather impressive, if you ask me, especially when you consider my guy put up national ranking numbers. That type of system with those type of results couldn't have been simple.
No, it wasn't, man. It was simple enough for us to understand it, but of course, it was a little more complex for the defense to decipher what we were doing. Because like we use, because we used to use African names and stuff like that, Kenya, Nigeria, and then of course we had some black historian names like Harriet Tubman, and she was one of the names that we kind of used and stuff like that. So it was a little different. It was a little difficult for people to decipher. But for us, we had a number system, but we knew what numbers applied to what positions, man. So I think that was the thing that kind of made us stand out offensively because of that, the number system that we used and had in place.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It had to be complex. And as Coach Evans points out, this level of preparation is being instilled in black quarterbacks across the nation at the high school level. Yet, even at the NFL level, quarterbacks the likes of Cam Newton and Lamar Jackson have had their ability to call plays and understand the playbook questioned, almost as if the media is checking for understanding, like a teacher testing a student. Disrespectful, if you ask me. And speaking of disrespectful, I wanted to ask Coach about that Campanis comment we heard earlier. As someone who had the intellect and the talent to perform at a high level at that position, I imagine he may have an opinion on the comment. So I played it for him and got his take on it.
So when you hear that, and you think about that juxtaposed to some of the kids you work with now, growing up then, the complexity of Coach Ware's system, what do you think about a statement like
It's a trans statement, and it's a slap in the face for guys, who know the game, who study the game, who watch the game, who submerge themselves in the game. It's definitely a slap in the face when it comes to that, man. And I've seen it across the board. I've seen it a lot of different places. And like I said, my high school coach to this day, even though I had a chance to play professionally, I still consider him to be the smartest coach that I've ever been affiliated with, man, because of the stuff we were doing. Even before I got to Westwood, it was what he was doing in the late 80s, early 90s, before I got to Westwood. And to see the things that we were doing when I got there, I think it's definitely a trash statement, man. And it hurts a lot of guys, man, especially at the QB spot, who got a lot of ability and not just athletes playing quarterback. They actually sit back there and decipher defenses and read defenses and pick people apart,
Right.
But just don't get the opportunity. And this happened through the years, man. We get so heavily critiqued about stuff like that when it's really some nonsense to me.
Yeah, that's what I thought he would say. And I think that talent, intellect, and leadership, which is why I think Uncle Dougie was great at Cheneyville. Williams wasn't just a quarterback. He was a field general, commanding respect with his poise, work ethic, and ability to elevate those around him. His leadership wasn't about flashy plays. It was just about making others better, staying composed under pressure, and proving he belonged. All the things you need for a QB1 to be successful. And that presence and determination caught the attention of college recruiters, leading him to Grambling State University, where legendary coach Eddie Robinson saw not just an athlete, but a leader who could win. And much like, say, a Fritz Pollard, Uncle Dougie displayed courage under fire and tenacity in the face of adversity. So it was in the fall of Wait, I'm sorry, what? What do you mean you've never heard of Fritz Pollard? You cannot be serious. Okay. You generally don't know who Fritz Pollard is. Okay, all right, let's go back. Let's go. It's not your fault. It's fine. Let's go back. Let's see. Let's go back to, let's say, maybe 1920? Okay, we could, after all, stay here. Because, see, that's when Fritz Pollard led the Akron Pros to an undefeated season and a championship, back when the league was still called the American Professional Football Association before it became the National Football League in 1924. Pollard became the NFL's first black head coach the following season when he became a player coach. But let's rewind a bit further, actually, because shortly after Pollard's success, the NFL banned black players altogether, a decision fueled by none other than Washington owner George Preston Marshall in 1932. And that ban, it only lasted until 1946. I don't know. Maybe they was missing some speed, I guess. But no, I actually want to go back a bit further. Right about there. Yeah, that should do it. November 18th, 1916, at Harvard Stadium in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The Brown Bears are on the verge of history, and Fritz Pollard is leading the charge. Pollard was no stranger to breaking barriers. The year before, in 1915, he became the first African American to play in the Rose Bowl, putting his talent on display for the nation. And by 1916, he was already one of the most electrifying players in college football. The week before, he torched the Yale Bulldogs for 144 yards and a touchdown in a very dominant 21-6 victory. Now, with the win over Harvard, Brown could accomplish something never done before, beating both Yale and Harvard in the same season. So today, here at Harvard Stadium, under the clear skies, the Brown Bears face the Crimson, and Pollard, known as the Human Torpedo, is about to deliver a performance for the ages. You know what? Let me take off my podcasting headphones for a second and put on my play-by-play headphones here.
Oh yeah, see what I can do. Brown comes to the line of scrimmage, ball spotted at their own 35-yard line, 1st and 10. Quarterback Bill Sprackling is under center, and Fritz Pollard is in the backfield. Sprackling takes the snap, quick pitch left to Pollard. He secures it and moves toward the sideline. Pollard turns upfield. He's past midfield. A defender approaches him. He cuts inside. Another defender closes in. Pollard sidesteps. He's at the 40, the 30, still moving. Pollard at the 20, the 10. Touchdown, Brown. That is amazing. The Human Torpedo strikes again. Fritz Pollard is putting on a clinic here at Harvard Stadium, and Brown is rolling. What a run by the young sensation. Whew. All right, put the podcast and headphones back on here.
That was kind of fun. I should do that more often. Anyways, Pollard dominated Harvard for 148 yards and 2 touchdowns, leading Brown to a 21-0 victory, the first over Harvard. The New Britain Herald called him, quote, the best halfback of the season, and his performances made him a national star. His impact extended beyond touchdowns and wins. It paved the way for future generations of black athletes. One of the athletes who followed in Uncle Fritz's footsteps was Doug Williams, who stayed close to home enrolling in Grambling State University under the Hall of Fame coach Eddie Robinson, like we mentioned before, in the fall of 1974. Coach Robinson was more than a coach. He was a mentor, a teacher, and a father figure, much like the black NCOs we highlighted in our episode of Alwyn Cash. See, Coach Robinson spent 57 years at Grambling from 1941 to 1997, winning 408 games, 17 Southwestern Athletic Conference titles, 9 Black College National Championships, and at one point holding the record for the most wins in college football history. And over 200 of his players would make it into the NFL. For much of Robinson's career, PWIs, or predominantly white institutions, making HBCUs, or historically black colleges and universities, the only path to higher level competition. These schools became critical proving grounds for black talent. Coach Evans, who also played at a HBCU, Tennessee State University, shares more on that experience.
If you look at NFL football, right, the all-time leading rusher at one point was Walter Payton.
Right.
He played at Jackson State. The all-time leading receiver in NFL history, and probably I don't think his record will ever be broken, is Jerry Rice, and he played at Mississippi Valley State.
Right.
So it's like for anybody on the NFL level to exclude HBCUs is really kind of weird and tough to see, because here you are, Walter Payton and Jerry Rice from the SWAC, from Mississippi Valley and Jackson State, but you don't think that any other kid from any HBCUs can play on the NFL level and still have the same impact or still make the same impact, which is crazy to me. And again, Michael Strahan played at Texas Southern. He holds the record for sacks in the season.
Right.
So that's another thing. And then you look at Steve McNair from Alcorn. I thought he should have won the Heisman Trophy, but he didn't. And he tied for NFL MVP from the SWAC, from black college football. So it's a lot of guys, man, they can make an impact, but they just got to get a fair opportunity,
The success of coaches like Eddie Robinson and the prominence of HBCU athletic programs played a crucial role in providing black athletes with opportunities that were otherwise denied in many major conferences during that era. And Uncle Dougie would take full advantage of this opportunity. He had an outstanding college career as a quarterback for the Grambling State Tigers from 1974 to 1977. A 4-year starter, which is impressive on its own. He led the team to a 36-7 record with 3 Southwestern Athletic Conference titles. And also, Uncle Dougie was twice named Black College Player of the Year. And his senior year was exceptionally memorable. One standout game occurred on October 1, 1977, when the Tigers faced Prairie View A&M. Uncle Dougie showcased an exceptional array of passing abilities by throwing for 5 touchdown passes, leading Grambling to a dominant 70-7 victory. Another notable performance took place December 11, 1977, when Grambling State played Temple University in the inaugural Mirage Bowl in Tokyo, Japan. In this thrilling contest, Williams threw 4 touchdown passes, guiding the Tigers to a narrow 35-32 win. His senior season, Uncle Dougie led the NCAA in total yards, passing yards, touchdowns, and yards per play, finishing 4th in the Heisman Trophy voting. By the end of his collegiate career, he had set NCAA records all over the place, and in 2001, he would be named to the College Football Hall of Fame. Rightfully so. His time at Grambling was memorable, but for more than football. It's also where he met Janice, his first wife, and they had a daughter together. How cute. Heading into the 1978 NFL Draft, Doug Williams was a top prospect, known for his arm, strength, leadership, and record-breaking senior season at Grambling. Despite his credentials, however, no African-American quarterback had ever been drafted in the first round. But the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive coordinator, Joe Gibbs, saw something special. After extensive evaluation, Gibbs ranked Williams as the best quarterback in the draft and pushed hard for his selection. And by thorough evaluation, I mean Joe Gibbs didn't just watch film. He flew down to Louisiana to meet Uncle Dougie in person, not just the quarterback. He sat with him. He ate with his family. He had deep conversations with Coach Eddie Robinson. Gibbs knew Uncle Dougie was a game-changing talent, exactly something the 2-12 Buccaneers needed at the time. His endorsement was key to Tampa Bay drafting Williams, alongside head coach John McKay, who was fully on board. But that's no surprise for John McKay. His track record proves he had no problem winning with black players. But more on that in the post-credit content. Consider this your second and final warning. And on May 2nd, 1978, history was made.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers, first round selection, quarterback, Doug Williams of Grambling.
The Tampa Bay Buccaneers selected Doug Williams with the 17th overall pick, making him the first African-American quarterback ever taken in the first round of the NFL draft. This historic selection not only highlighted Uncle Dougie's talent, but also marked a significant step forward in diversifying the quarterback position in professional football. And Coach Gibbs, his mentorship didn't stop on draft day. He was fully invested in Uncle Dougie's success. He invited Williams to live with him in his home, giving them extra time to study the playbook together. Gibbs knew that the faster Uncle Dougie mastered the system, the sooner he could lead the team to victories. And that bet paid off. While many in Tampa Bay's newly formed fan base were skeptical of the pick, one preseason game quickly changed their minds. Because in that game, Uncle Dougie finally steps to the field for his first time in an NFL uniform. The fans, like I said, weren't sure what to expect, but they was about to find out real soon. Because Williams lined up under center, the ball spotted at Tampa Bay's 25-yard line. He took the snap, dropped back, and then Uncle Dougie let that bad boy fly. The ball soared down the sideline, 75 yards. It was just out of reach of his receiver, falling incomplete. But that didn't matter. The crowd erupted. It wasn't just a pass, it was a statement. Uncle Dougie had arrived. And even after just one throw, Tampa Bay fans knew they had something special on their hands. Tampa Bay was definitely in for something special because Uncle Dougie took over as QB1 for the expansion team trying to find its footing. And history tells us that rarely goes well. But in Uncle Dougie's story, like the story of Black America, it's about making the most of limited opportunities. Because Williams became the starter as a rookie in 1978 and quickly transformed the Buccaneers. In 1979, Doug Williams led the Buccaneers to a 10-6 record, winning their first NFC Central Division title and securing a spot in the playoffs. That season also featured a historic moment. Williams and Chicago's Vince Evans became the first African-American starting quarterbacks to face off in an NFL game. And if Vince Evans sounds familiar, that's because Coach Kenton Evans mentioned him earlier as like his play uncle. Over the next 5 seasons in Tampa Bay, Doug Williams led the Buccaneers to 3 playoff appearances and an NFC title game, transforming the Buccaneers into a contender. However, as the only starting quarterback in the NFL at the time, he faced constant challenges, racial bias, skepticism, and pressure. Check out this one quote from a fan.
There's some talks of Williams being a little bit on the choke side.
Yet his leadership and talent spoke louder than any doubt. In 67 starts, Williams threw for 12,648 yards and 73 touchdowns, proving that when you give a qualified, talented person the opportunity they deserve, success often follows. Call it diversity, equity, and inclusion, or just call it what happens when barriers are broken. But I'm sure there were detractors. Sure, Dominic, he got his chance, but was he really ready? Black quarterbacks can't just be thrown into the game and succeed. They don't process the game as quickly or learn the playbook like white quarterbacks do. Is that right? First off, you sound like a real idiot. And secondly, never threaten a history enthusiast with a good time. Because boy, do I have just the story for you. You know what? Let's leave Uncle Dougie here in 1983 for a second. Besides, he has some contract negotiations to get ready for after a great 5-year run. Actually, let's jump ahead a few years to October 19th, 1987 at Texas Stadium in Irving, Texas. The Dallas Cowboys were hosting Washington, but this wasn't a typical game. See, the NFLPA, or National Football League Player Association, was on strike after week 2 of the season. And with many players sitting out, teams turned to replacement players to take the field. Some of the Cowboys' top players, Tony Dorsett, Ed Too Tall Jones, and Randy White, crossed the picket line and played. But Washington mostly relied on replacement players, which means the odds were not in their favor, and at the center of this story is one player in particular. Washington's backup quarterback, Tony Robinson, wasn't just a strike replacement. his presence on the field was remarkable, but for an entirely different reason. The former Tennessee standout was actually on leave from prison. This is a true story. In January of 1986, Robinson's promising career took a turn and he was arrested in a sting operation and charged with selling 30 grams of cocaine. He later pleaded no contest to lesser charges and was sentenced to 9 months in prison. While serving his sentence, Tony Robinson played for the Richmond Ravens, where his coach, a friend of Joe Gibbs, recommended him to Washington during the 1987 NFL strike. Signed as a backup in September, Robinson likely didn't expect to play, but fate had other plans.
Rupert is on the sidelines, and it will appear that we'll have a new quarterback, Tony Robinson of Tennessee.
Because early in the game, starter Ed Rupert went down with a shoulder injury, forcing Robinson into action. Under pressure, he delivered.
Here comes a full blitz against Robinson, and Robinson reads it well, gets it quickly to Anthony Allen, and a very cool move by Tony Robinson.
Completing 11 of 18 passes for 152 yards, leading Washington to a stunning 13-7 victory, one of the biggest upsets in NFL history. Robinson's time with Washington ended as the strike did, and when he was released, he returned back to prison to finish his sentence. Since then, he's become a model citizen working with children and other things, but his impact was lasting. His win secured Washington's third straight victory with replacement players, leaving Washington the only team to go undefeated with replacement players, setting the stage for a very special season. But more on that later. His story is a reminder that opportunity can come unexpectedly, and that black quarterbacks have always proven their adaptability and intelligence. Black quarterbacks have proven they can play at the highest level, and when they do, they should be paid accordingly, which brings us back to Uncle Dougie's contract negotiations. In the early 1980s, Doug Williams was the cornerstone of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, just to remind you, leading the team to 3 playoff appearances in 5 seasons. Yet, he was severely underpaid, earning about $120,000 per year, the lowest salary among NFL starting quarterbacks. Now, to be fair, $120,000, whether it be 1983 or 2025, is nothing to scoff at, but still, my man is getting lowballed here. And to put that in perspective, 12 backup quarterbacks in the league made more than Uncle Dougie. And to drive this point home, let's play a game of blind resume. If you remember our episode on Wendell Scott and how he was robbed of the Rookie of the Year award in NASCAR, you'll know how this works, but if not, let me explain. I'll give you the stats of 3 quarterbacks from the 1982 NFL season, and you decide who deserves the highest paycheck. Keep in mind, this was a strike-shortened season with only 9 games played. The first quarterback is obviously Doug Williams, who played 9 games, winning 5 of them, passed for over 2,000 yards, and threw 9 touchdowns. Quarterback 2 played 7 games, winning 1 of them, and passing for 880 yards, throwing 6 touchdowns. And quarterback 3, who played 8 games, winning 4 of them, passed for over 1,300 yards, and tossed 6 touchdown passes. Looking at the numbers, quarterback 1 is the clear standout, who is Uncle Dougie. More wins, more yards, more touchdowns, even more games. But now, let's check the salaries. As I mentioned earlier, Doug Williams, $120,000. Quarterback 2, $600,000 that season. And quarterback 3, $450,000 that season. That's right, Uncle Dougie, the best performer, was the lowest paid starting quarterback in the league. And now for the big reveal. Quarterback number 2 is Archie Manning, who went 1-6 that season and made over $500,000. And quarterback 3, Ken Stabler, who had a mediocre season and still made nearly 4 times Williams' salary. Meanwhile, Uncle Dougie led his team to the playoffs while fighting for more than just wins, He was fighting for respect, and that fight would soon lead to a career-altering decision. Frustrated by the pay gap, Uncle Dougie entered contract negotiations, seeking a salary in between $500,000 and $600,000, closer to what his peers earned. Buccaneers owner Hugh Culverhouse countered with $400,000, but refused to budge, leading to a contentious standoff. Now, some argued the offer was fair, especially compared to Ken Stabler, a Super Bowl champ and former MVP, or Archie Manning, who is a veteran QB himself with 2 Pro Bowl appearances. But both were on the decline, while Williams was a young gun hitting his stride. He had transformed an expansion team, leading Tampa Bay to 3 playoff appearances, a division title, and NFC championship game. Yet, he still wasn't valued like his counterparts. And amid contract negotiations, Uncle Dougie faced an even greater challenge. In April of 1983, his wife Janice was diagnosed with a brain tumor. Despite emergency surgery, she passed away, leaving him to grieve while raising their young daughter. Feeling undervalued professionally and devastated personally, Williams made a life-changing decision. In August of 1983, he left the NFL and signed with the Oklahoma Outlaws of the upstart United States Football League, or USFL, seeking fair compensation and a fresh start. Doug Williams' performance in the USFL was a bit of a mixed bag. In his first season, he threw for over 3,000 yards, 15 touchdowns, but 21 interceptions. The following year, now with the Arizona Outlaws, he improved to 3,600 yards and 21 touchdowns, but also 17 interceptions. And Uncle Dougie was getting paid handsomely. He signed a $3 million contract with a $1 million signing bonus. But despite his efforts, the USFL folded after 3 seasons, leaving Uncle Dougie at the crossroads. The league's collapse ended his tenure with the Outlaws and left him without a team, without a future in football. Just a few years earlier, he was on top of the world, leading Tampa Bay to its first championship game, proving doubters wrong and showing that a black quarterback could thrive in the NFL. But football is most certainly a here today, gone tomorrow sport. First, the contract battles, outplaying his peers but earning a fraction of their salaries. Then, the loss of his wife, Janice, a pain no game could ever prepare him for. He had walked away from the NFL for something better, but now, with no league, no team, and no offers, was this really how the story was supposed to end? But then, the phone rang. It was Joe Gibbs, his former offensive coordinator in Tampa Bay, now the head coach of the Washington football team. He had one request: come to Washington. Be ready, he said. At that moment, Uncle Dougie wasn't just returning to the NFL. He was stepping into a destiny. Coach Gibbs had thrown him a lifeline. And when he got there, Coach Gibbs told Uncle Dougie they were going to need him one day. And his gut proved correct. And we fast forward to the end of the 1987 regular season. As that season progressed, Washington reached a pivotal moment. Thanks in part to Tony Robinson and the replacement players' early season efforts, the team was not only playoff bound, but poised for a Super Bowl run. But starting quarterback Jay Schrader had been inconsistent all season, forcing head coach Joe Gibbs to make a critical decision. He turned to Doug Williams, a veteran who had just started 2 games that season, but he was ready for the moment. Williams seized the opportunity, leading Washington on an impressive playoff run. In the divisional round against the Chicago Bears, he orchestrated a 21-17 victory, showcasing his leadership and poise under pressure.
They show it blitz again. He's got Didier, touchdown.
And the momentum continued in the NFC Championship game against the Minnesota Vikings. Williams connected with receiver Gary Clark for a pivotal 7-yard touchdown pass, breaking a 10-10 tie and securing the win. and this propelled Washington to the Super Bowl. Throughout this playoff journey, Williams demonstrated remarkable resilience and skill, completing key passes and maintaining composure. His performance not only silenced critics, but also set the stage for a historic Super Bowl appearance. As Washington prepared to face Denver in Super Bowl 22, the game carried historic weight. For Uncle Dougie, he was about to become the first black quarterback to start in a Super Bowl. The media spotlight was relentless, highlighting both the progress it represented and the barriers he had overcome. That's what we tend to do in Black America, whether it be trying to make it to the next day in your job or how Jackie Robinson did back in the 40s. You sometimes just gotta have to grill it up and eat it because you're focused on the bigger prize. Across the field stood John Elway, the NFL's golden boy and former number 1 pick. The NFL had its dream matchup, but for Williams, this game wasn't about Elway. It was about something much bigger.
Good afternoon from Jack Murphy Stadium in San Diego, California. The road to Super Bowl 22 stops right here. This afternoon, we're going to play the biggest football game in the history.
The stadium is packed with over 73,000 fans. The air was crisp, the lights very bright. The national anthem had been sung, and the coin toss was complete. Uncle Dougie stood at midfield, taking it all in. I mean, think about it. A year ago, he wasn't even in the league. And 2 years ago, he was out of football entirely. But now, he was about to make history. And here we are. Kickoff. Now, the Denver Broncos wasted no time making their mark. On the very first play from scrimmage, quarterback John Elway launched a 56-yard touchdown pass to wide receiver Ricky Nattiel.
Formation. And Elway going for the bomb right at the outset. Throws caught by Nattiel. Touchdown!
This stunned the Washington football team and ignited the crowd. And the Broncos' momentum continued as they orchestrated a 7-play, 61-yard drive culminating in a 24-yard field goal. With just under 6 minutes remaining in the first quarter, Denver held a 10-0 lead, and Washington appeared to be ready to be knocked out of this game very early. And to add insult to injury, late in the quarter, Uncle Dougie suffered a hyperflexed left knee while stepping back in the pocket, forcing him to leave the game temporarily.
He goes to plant, and you get just a perfect view of it. His right foot on the instep just slid all the way out from underneath him. And Frank.
Backup Jay Schrader stepped in, but just like before, the offense remained stagnant. As the first quarter concluded, the Broncos seemed firmly in control, boasting a 10-0 advantage. Washington faced not only a significant deficit, but also uncertainty at the QB position. But little did anyone anticipate the historic turnaround that was about to unfold. As Uncle Dougie sat on the Washington bench at the end of the first quarter, he stared at that scoreboard. Denver 10, Washington 0. His left knee, I imagine, throbbed from the injury just minutes ago. His mind raced. Not like this. Not after everything. The weight of history was pressing down on him. He knew it. Everyone knew it. He wasn't just playing for himself. He wasn't just playing for Washington. Uncle Dougie knew he was playing for every black quarterback who had ever been told they weren't smart enough, weren't skilled enough, and weren't good enough to play the position at the highest level. But then something shifted inside of him. The doubt faded. He had been through worse. He thought about Zachary, Louisiana, where he grew up, where being black meant knowing struggle, where opportunity had to be fought for. He thought about Grambling State, where Coach Andy Robinson had pushed him harder than anyone ever had, teaching him that greatness wasn't a request, it was an expectation. He thought about Tampa Bay, where he had silenced the critics, where he had led a team to heights they had never seen before, only to be discarded, undervalued, underpaid, and overlooked. He thought about the loss of Janice, the pain of burying his wife, of holding their baby daughter, of wondering if he'd ever get another chance to do what he loved. And now, here he was, back in the biggest game of them all. This wasn't about winning a Super Bowl. This was about proving something that should have never been in doubt. Uncle Dougie takes a deep breath and stood up. It's just as the ancestor Maya Angelou once said, "You may encounter many defeats, but you must not be defeated."
And Williams going deep. Sanders beats Haynes. Sanders out in front. 80 yards, touchdown. Hello, sports fans.
They said the black quarterback could play in the Super Bowl, but could he thrive under pressure? Doug Williams just gave them an answer.
Williams for Clark. Touchdown.
They said the black quarterback could manage a game, but could he take over one? Doug Williams just gave them an answer.
Fake to Smith. Williams deep for Sanders again. Makes the catch at the 10. Touchdown.
They said the black quarterback could lead a team, but could he dominate on the sport's biggest stage? Doug Williams just gave them an answer.
And he lost it for Didier. And as Frank said, it's getting to be Didier time. Touchdown.
They said the black quarterback could dream of winning a Super Bowl, but could he actually do it? Doug Williams just gave them an answer. 4 touchdowns in a single quarter, a Super Bowl record, a statement, a legacy. Doug Williams wasn't just playing in the Super Bowl. On January 31st, 1988 in San Diego, California, he was owning it. And he did what we have always done in Black America. Sometimes you have to show them who you are. Uncle Dougie's remarkable performance in Super Bowl 22 not only secured a championship for Washington with a 42-10 win, but also earned him the Super Bowl MVP, cementing his place in NFL history. His heroics resonated deeply within the Black community and sent ripples throughout the football world, signaling that Black quarterbacks had not only arrived, but were here to stay. Oh, and in 2018, my guy Tony Robinson was rewarded with a Super Bowl ring due to his efforts that season. I love that for him. It proves just because you make a mistake, that's not the end of the story. Uncle Dougie's legacy paved the way for the rise of Black quarterbacks in the NFL. In 2001, Michael Vick became the first Black QB drafted number 1 overall, ushering in a new era. By 2023, Super Bowl 57 saw Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts make history as the first 2 Black quarterbacks to face off in football's biggest stage. And on this Sunday, February 9th, 2025, they'll meet again in Super Bowl 59, proving that Black quarterbacks are now central to the game's overall success. After his Super Bowl triumph, Uncle Dougie played a few more seasons before transitioning into coaching, leading Grambling State to multiple SWAC titles. Today, he serves as senior advisor to the Washington Commanders, mentoring rookie quarterback Jaden Daniels, who led his team to the NFC Championship game in his very first season. The evolution is undeniable. Caleb Williams and the aforementioned Jaden Daniels went 1 and 2 in the 2024 NFL Draft. Bryce Young went number 1 last year, and Lamar Jackson is now a 2-time MVP. And at the start of the 2024 season, a record 15 teams were led by Black QB1s. And they're not just playing, they're getting paid, resetting the market with every new contract. To make it simple, the league is better for having Black quarterbacks in it. And all of those quarterbacks have to pay homage to Doug Williams, who did not let stereotypes stop him from performing at the highest level in this game. The proud son of Louisiana shows us that talent, athletic ability, and intelligence have nothing to do with the color of your skin, but with the God-given gifts you embrace, the responsibility you take, and the work you put in to get better, to climb higher, and to reach back for the next generation. And that is why Doug Williams is the American quarterback. The Black is America podcast, presented by Owl's Education Company in collaboration with the UMA Collective Group, was created, hosted, written, and produced by me, Dominic Lawson. Executive producer, Kendall Lawson. Cover art was created by Alexandria Eddings of Art Life Connections. Special thanks to Coach Kenton Evans for his contribution to this episode. Sources to create this episode include The Washington Post, The Los Angeles Times, The Atlanta Journal-Constitution, ESPN, NFL.com, NFL Films, ABC News, ABC Sports, ProFootballReference.com, the Tampa Bay Times, the Commanders' official website, Commanders.com, the College Football Hall of Fame, the United States Football League Archives, the National Football League Archives, the New Britain Herald, and others. For a full list of these resources, please go to the show notes. Be sure to like, review, and subscribe to Black is America on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you enjoy the show, spread the word. We would greatly appreciate it. For a full transcript of this episode and additional resources, go to www.blackisamericapodcast.com. There, you can read our blog, leave us a review, or send us a voicemail that we might even feature in a future episode. Thank you again for listening to the award-winning Black is America podcast, where our history comes to life. Until next time. Hey, you made it. You checking out the post-credit content. Welcome. So glad you're here. Well, let me not hold you. Now, if you remember earlier, I mentioned Coach John McKay, the head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, when Doug Williams was drafted. But before he was an NFL coach, Coach McKay was the architect of the powerhouse college football program at USC, otherwise known as the University of Southern California. And let me tell you, he had no problem recruiting and starting Black players, especially at the time when they weren't recruiting them in the South. But there's another legendary coach around this time, and he's sitting in a different situation. Paul Bear Bryant, the head coach at the famed University of Alabama, the Crimson Tide. And in the late 60s, Bryant was facing a problem. See, the Bear wanted to recruit Black players, but the good folks in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, weren't exactly having that. They weren't on board with the idea at all. The Deep South was still holding on to this myth about football, like many things, that it was a game for white men to lead. But Bryant knew better. He saw what was happening in other parts of the country, and he knew that if Alabama didn't integrate, they'd eventually fall behind. So Bryant did something about it. While crossing paths at the airport with his good friend Coach McKay, he asked him to bring his fully integrated championship-winning USC squad down to Alabama to play a nationally televised game. Bryant's thinking, if Alabama's fan base saw firsthand how dominant Black players could be, they'd have no choice but to accept the need for change. Now, I'm not going to go out on a limb and say that Paul Bear Bryant was trying to move the cause of equality together. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But what I do know is that he knew he needed other players to continue his championship-winning ways. And so on September 12, 1970, inside of Legion Field in Birmingham, Alabama, the University of Southern California Trojans walked into Bryant's backyard and, well, delivered what we like to call in the South a 40-minute come-to-Jesus meeting. Now listen, I'm a Southerner through and through, and trust me when I say that the SEC fan in me did not necessarily want to see Alabama take a L like that and get stomped on their own field, but the fan of equality, the believer of progress, oh yeah, you can go ahead and beat that ass as far as I'm concerned. And that's exactly what USC did. USC demolished Alabama 42-21 in front of the home crowd in Birmingham, Alabama on national TV. And leading the charge was my guy Sam Bam Cunningham, a 6'3", 225-pound African-American running back who honestly ran right through Alabama's defense, almost like he had a grudge against segregation itself. Check out this stat line. 12 carries, 135 yards, 2 touchdowns. My guy averaged 11.3 yards per carry, which means he basically ran for a first down every time he touched the ball. His first carry was a touchdown. His second was our 50-yard scamper. Cunningham was so dominant that the Alabama players could only watch in shock and awe. Here are a few quotes that came from the aftermath of that game. See, Alabama running back Johnny Musso scored twice himself, but he barely remembers any of the offensive possessions because of Sam Cunningham's dominant performance at USC. He said, quote, "It was like junior high kids chasing after him." Another player said, quote, "The black guys were bigger, stronger, and faster than us. The white guys were bigger, stronger, and faster than us. And if they had polka dot guys, they were bigger, stronger, and faster than us." And a few days later after the game, a fan said, "Whew, we got to get us some of those players." Now, the whole "get us some of those players," okay, I knew what he meant, but that's neither here nor there. The funny thing is that Sam Bam Cunningham was actually recruited to play at Alabama by Bear Bryant. But given the whole policy of not having black players on the team, they had to learn the hard way. Legend has it that after the game, Bear Bryant walked Sam Cunningham into the Alabama locker room and told his players, quote, "This is what a football player looks like." Translation, this is the future, and we better get with the program. And let me tell you, it wasn't just a game. It was a statement. Funny enough, a whole lot of black folks in Alabama were rooting for USC that day because they knew what this game meant. If USC showed out, it could force change in a way that no argument, no protest, and no law ever had. And that's exactly what happened. Over the years, Alabama will start to recruit black players. In addition to that, all over the SEC, black players would join their ranks, forever changing the landscape of college football in the South. And in 1971, Alabama would win a national title with an integrated team. Imagine that. And one of those players Alabama recruited in the wake of this moment, Sylvester Croom. Croom was a star lineman at Alabama under Bear Bryant in the early 70s. But even bigger than that, in 2004, Croom made history by becoming the first black head coach in SEC football history when he took over Mississippi State. College football was never the same again. At the end of the day, football isn't just a game. It's a mirror to society. And what happened that night in Birmingham, Alabama in 1970 wasn't just about Alabama losing. It was about breaking barriers, shattering old beliefs, and proving once again that when you let black talent shine, it doesn't just succeed, they can dominate. Well, I'm not going to hold you too much longer. Thank you so much for sticking around for the post-credit content there. Please subscribe to the Black is America podcast, where our history comes to life. And seriously, for real this time, until next time.